Arthur Caldwell suffered from severe manic episodes during his heat cycles. His mother approached me, the perfect pheromone match, with an offer. £200,000 per cycle to help my son through his heat, she proposed. I gladly accepted. Manic episodes? Nothing a good thrashing couldn't fix. After a satisfying beating, I planted my foot on his sculpted abs and smiled as I tugged open my collar. Want a bite? I teased. Beg for it. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. I sat on the sofa with my legs crossed, looking at the stacks of money laid out on the table. Arthur's red-induced mania is severe. Only a perfectly matched omega can calm him down. You're the only one I've found with 100% pheromone compatibility with Arthur. As soon as you agree, this money will be transferred to your account. My gaze swept over the money a few times, then moved to the face of the woman speaking. She was a well-preserved middle-aged woman with a decisive air about her. Known in upper-class circles as Mrs. Caldwell. With a mother like that, the son probably wouldn't be too bad either. Seeing that I hadn't spoken, the woman let out a small sigh and continued to sweeten the deal. £300,000 per session, or if you have any other conditions, you can name them. I chuckled softly, uncrossing my legs and relaxing back into the chair. It's not that. According to what you've said, your son suffers from severe mania. What if he hits me? I'm certainly not going to just sit there and take a beating. Under normal circumstances, I would defend myself, maybe even fight back. Can you accept that? The woman nodded, of course. If you sustain any injuries because of Arthur, I'll cover all medical expenses and pay you additional compensation. I waved my hand, that's all I needed to hear. I stretched my neck and stood up. Let's go then, to your son. Let's see what this raging wolf looks like. As soon as I entered Arthur Caldwell's bedroom, the pheromones in the room were so strong that I frowned. If I hadn't taken suppressants, I might have been affected too. Looking around, the furnishings in this room had already been smashed to pieces. A man with slightly disheveled hair and a loose collar sat on the sofa chair by the window. The man looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot and extremely red. Get out. I stared at his face for a moment. Not bad actually. Quite to my taste. Didn't you hear me? Get the hell out! Arthur grabbed a vase from the table and hurled it at me violently. I dodged to the side, and the expensive porcelain shattered on the floor. The pheromones in the room intensified due to his emotional fluctuation. TSK, quite fierce indeed. Needs some training. I walked closer with my hands in my pockets, avoiding the shards on the floor, and stopped a few steps away from him. I know you're in a lot of pain right now. I'll give you two choices. 1. I knock you out and you ride out your red unconscious. 2. You temporarily mark me and let me comfort you. Pick one. Damn, are you deaf? The agitated man stood up and grabbed me, trying to drag me out. I spun around and kicked him back onto the sofa with full force. I must say, he's quite heavy. Calm down, I don't want to use force either. The man seemed furious now. He gripped the sofa with both hands, his gaze fixed on me, letting out dangerous low growls from his throat. His chest heaved dramatically as he struggled to control his emotions. The atmosphere was tense. In the next instant, he pounced on me like a cheetah. I took half a step back, found the right moment to hook his shoulder, and exerted force. With a dull thud, the man was slammed hard onto the floor by my shoulder throw. Arthur was a bit dazed from the fall, staring blankly with his eyes open, unable to speak for quite a while. I stepped on his chest, neither too lightly nor too heavily. Slowly sliding down to his abs, then casually bit my fingertip. A few strands of pheromones seeped out with the blood from my finger. Arthur was stunned at first, then his eyes turned dark red, fixating on my neck without moving. Seeing this, I slightly opened my collar, exposing the skin of my collarbone, and looked down at the man under my foot, tilting my head. Want to bite? Beg me. Dead silence. Our gazes locked, and I waited patiently. After a moment, Arthur seemed to finally reach his limit. His burning palm gripped my ankle, caressing up my trouser leg to my calf, his voice hoarse. I beg you. Let me bite you. The The soft skin on the nape of my neck was pierced by sharp teeth, and a rich pheromone was injected into my gland. I let out a stifled groan of discomfort, gripping the curtain tightly to prevent myself from sliding down with weak limbs. "Be gentle," I murmured. Arthur embraced me from behind, his tongue still licking at my gland, a deeply satisfied low, husky breath caught in his throat. The pheromones of the alpha and omega intermingled, entwining intimately until they were indistinguishable. After catching my breath for a good while, I pushed Arthur away and reapplied the suppressant patch before sitting back on the sofa. "Have you come to your senses?" I asked. The man blinked several times, his gaze clear, a faint blush slowly creeping up to the tips of his ears. Like a demure newlywed, he meekly lowered his head and shuffled to sit across from me. What kind of relationship do we have now?" he asked hesitantly. What did he mean by that? I spoke up. "We don't have any relationship." Arthur looked up in surprise, his hair practically standing on end like a question mark. "I have a relationship with your mother. She's my benefactor," I clarified. The man's pupils dilated in shock, his expression cracking like the shell of a 1,000-year-old tortoise. "You're my stepfather? What nonsense." I sat up straight and explained word by word. "My name is Crispin Sheffield. Your pheromones are an extremely rare case nationwide. As it happens, I am too. And I also happen to be the only omega in the country with a 100% pheromone match to you. Your mother approached me with money, asking me to treat your red-induced mania. I'm simply doing a job I was paid for." "Understand? Arthur. Can't you say everything at once?" I bloody thought I'd cuckolded my own mom. Arthur let out a sigh of relief, casually running a hand through his hair. "Anyway, since I've marked you, I'll take responsibility for you." Stop. I held up a hand to interrupt him. "It was just a temporary mark, and your mother has already paid. Our transaction is over. Since you seem fine now, I'll be leaving." Arthur gaped at me as if I were some cad who used people and tossed them aside. I stood up to leave, but he grabbed my wrist. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "Home." "Did you need something else?" I asked, puzzled. Arthur ground his back teeth. "My rut isn't over yet. What if I go berserk again after you leave? You've taken the money, so you should see the job through." He had a point, I supposed. "So what do you want to do?" I asked. "You need to stay and keep me company, to provide comfort when I need it," Arthur said decisively. I looked around the room. There was clearly only one bed, and the sofa was a single, unsuitable for sleeping. Where would I sleep at night then? I'll tell you now, I never share a bed with anyone, not even a king size. "That's easy," Arthur said with a wave of his hand. "You can make a bed on the floor. We may not have a second bed, but we've got plenty of blankets." I stroked my chin, hesitating for a moment before finally nodding. "All right, but it'll cost extra." Late at night, I was comfortably scrolling through my phone when Arthur beside me tossed and turned, muttering incessantly. It was driving me mad. I glanced at him. "Can't you stay still? If you want to sleep, just sleep." Arthur suddenly threw off the covers and sat up. "Look, I don't understand. This is my house, so why are you sleeping in the bed while I'm on the floor?" I clicked my tongue. "Haven't I told you? The floor's too hard, I'm not used to it. But my bed is 6.5 feet wide. Are you planning to swim in your sleep? Why can't we just put a duvet down the middle and each sleep on one side? I'm a man of principles, I won't do anything to you. Can't you just get over your prissy attitude?" I turned off the light with a forced smile. "Don't be silly, be good now. Sleeping on the floor is good for your back. Go to sleep early, good night." There was a moment of silence in the darkness, then his angry shout rang out again. "Then why aren't you sleeping on the floor?" I rolled over with my back to him. "Because my back is already fine, and it's basic courtesy for an alpha to accommodate an omega." "That's enough, I'm tired." "Shut up and stop making noise." The person behind me continued to mutter, but I couldn't be bothered. I drifted off to sleep with a clear conscience. To be honest, I didn't approach Arthur Caldwell because of the money his mother offered, but out of curiosity. I knew from early on that he would be my alpha. My mom is a bit of a psychic. She can accurately predict everything that will happen in the future, mysteriously calling it the irresistible force of the plot. When I was very young, she sent me to learn martial arts, claiming, "We Omegas need to be not only beautiful but also capable of taking down an alpha's entire family." At that time, I hadn't presented yet. I clenched my fists and said, "I don't want to be an Omega." Mom patted my shoulder lovingly and said, "Darling, not only will you be an Omega, but you'll also inherit my stunning beauty. You'll be an Omega that every alpha will covet. Before you meet your destined partner, Arthur, you need to knock out all those dogs of alphas who try to take advantage of you." Though Arthur isn't a saint at first either. He's a bit troubled. If he dares to yell at you, you beat him up too. That was the first time I heard the name Arthur Caldwell. The name of my future mate. Later, everything my mom said came true. I presented as an Omega, and during my school years, half of the alphas wrote me love letters. Among those, half tried to sexually harass me, though they all ended up beaten to a pulp. Over time, my fierce reputation spread, and alphas would try to avoid me on the street. I kept waiting for Arthur to appear, curious to see what this legendary alpha of mine was really like. When I finally met him, well, no wonder he's my destined mate. Every single thing about him fits my aesthetic perfectly, even our pheromones are a perfect match. His temper could use some work though. I'll have to train him properly. The next morning, I woke up feeling pressed down. I opened my eyes to find an arm around my waist, a leg over mine, and warm breath on the back of my neck. This harassing bastard. I turned and kicked, expressionlessly sending Arthur tumbling off the bed. The servants at the Caldwell estate were incredibly grateful to me, looking at me as if I were some kind of saint. According to the butler, they had never experienced such peaceful days during the young master's heat cycles. As soon as I stood next to Mr. Caldwell, his rabid behavior would instantly subside. If I gave him a little pat, his tail would practically wag to the heavens. So when I prepared to leave, the butler and the other servants lined up in a row, their eyes brimming with tears and faces full of reluctance. Arthur Caldwell, his heat cycle now over, leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed. "Why are you all looking at him like that? It's not like he's your future master." Sure, not yet anyway. Just you wait, you'll be begging me to be soon enough." I rolled my eyes as I changed into my shoes, getting ready to head out. But I had barely taken a few steps when Arthur chased after me, gripping my shoulder with a pout on his face. "Crispin Sheffield, don't forget we have a contract. Even though we're not in a relationship right now, you can't let any other alphas touch you. Betas aren't allowed either. Do you understand?" Hearing this, I raised an eyebrow high. "The contract only states that I'm responsible for calming you during your heat cycles. There's nothing about what you just said, is there? I'm not your boyfriend, so why are you trying to restrict my freedom?" Arthur's face cycled through shades of red and blue like a chameleon. After a long moment, he finally found an excuse to speak up. "Because I can't stand the scent of any pheromones except yours. If you smell like someone else, it'll only make me more agitated." All right. I waved my hand dismissively, then shoved both hands in my pockets and leaned in close, closing the distance between us to something bordering on flirtatious. Just an inch closer and we could kiss. The tips of Arthur's ears began to turn red again. I exhaled softly. "I'll do as you say, but I'll pay you more." Well, someone's learned to anticipate. I straightened up and stretched lazily, turning to leave. "Fine, it's a deal." After returning, I dove straight into the lab to work on my postgraduate thesis. Normally, an alpha sensitivity period occurs every 1 to 3 months. But unexpectedly, less than 10 days later, the butler called me. "Mr. Sheffield, please come quickly. The young master is in a very bad state." I frowned. How could this be? Didn't he just go through it? I dropped the experimental data in my hands and rushed to the private room at Royal Redbridge Restaurant as fast as I could. The entire floor had basically been cleared out, with the Caldwell family's people surrounding the entrance. Arthur's pheromones in the air were unbelievably concentrated, clearly out of control. Even with suppressants, I couldn't avoid being somewhat affected. But upon closer sniffing, there was a hint of another scent mixed in. What exactly happened? I asked sternly. Well, the young master was supposed to be here tonight to discuss a project with Mr. Harwood. But as it happened, an Omega waiter went into heat right when they were serving the food. Everyone present was affected. The young master was especially severe. He fell ill on the spot. Luckily, people scattered quickly, otherwise a fight would have broken out. After we cleared everyone out, the young master locked himself inside. No one dares to go in. The butler was sweating profusely, looking worriedly at the tightly shut door. Who knows what's happening in there? What rotten luck he's having. Talk about unfortunate timing. I exhaled deeply, took off my coat and tossed it to the butler, then started stretching. Mr. Sheffield, what are you doing? Warming up, of course. Gotta limber up before getting to work. The butler looked utterly shocked. HH here? Shouldn't we take the young master home first before? That depends on whether he'll agree to it. I cracked my neck, turned the door handle and went in, immediately hit by Arthur's domineering scent. I closed the door behind me and surveyed the room. There were several obvious cracks on the marble table. Chairs were toppled all over the place, some missing arms and legs. Clearly, this place had just been through a merciless thrashing. The culprit was curled up in a chair in the farthest corner, head buried in his arms. Arthur? I called out tentatively. The man raised his head, veins bulging at his temples, eyes of familiar crimson. Arthur slowly stood up, gaze fixed intently on me. Focused like a predator on its prey, not shifting even slightly as he moved. He began approaching me gradually. I tensed my muscles, attention highly focused, ready to fight at any moment. But the next instant, my eyes widened in surprise. Because Arthur, stumbling and unsteady, looking fierce but actually incredibly gentle, spread his arms and embraced me fully. He nuzzled his nose against my neck, voice low and hoarse. Why did you take so long to come? I've been waiting for you for ages. He pressed against the back of my neck and inhaled deeply twice, grinding his teeth but not biting down. He pulled back slightly, eyes full of shimmering light. Can I kiss you now? Please. Arthur gently brushed the back of his hand against my cheek, waiting for my permission. The veins at his temples stretched down to his neck, making him look unbearably tense. My gaze slowly swept across his brows, eyes, and finally his lips. After staring for a moment, I spoke with utter coldness, no. As soon as the words left my mouth, I swiftly raised my hand and delivered a sharp chop, my movement quick and without hesitation. Caught off guard, Arthur was instantly knocked unconscious by the blow. As I caught his limp body, his eyes closed in shock, giving him a rather indignant look as he passed out. Honestly, I had no intention of doing a temporary bond in public. Dustin! Come in and carry your young master away. Coming. Is it over already? That was quick. Oh my, young master. What happened here? I handed Arthur over to Dustin the butler, rubbing my slightly sore shoulder. I knocked him out. Take him home first. We'll discuss the rest when we get back. The room was dim, illuminated only by the soft glow of a small night light. Arthur's long eyelashes cast shadows in the faint light, softening the usually sharp lines of his jaw. I sat beside him, leaning down to study his straight nose and thin lips. He was quite handsome indeed. His nose looked very kissable, and his lips very biteable. Kissing him would probably feel quite nice. Just as my fingertip grazed the corner of his mouth, Arthur stirred awake. He gazed at me with half-open eyes for a moment, then suddenly seemed to remember how I had knocked him out. His eyes widened comically. Crispin Sheffield, you tricked me. I blinked innocently back at him. I was only thinking of you being unconscious is less painful, isn't it? See, it worked perfectly. You made it home without any fuss. Arthur stared at me with his mouth slightly agape. His eyebrows furrowed as if the words unbelievable were written across my face. After a long pause, he turned his head away with a pout. I've been trying so hard not to lash out, waiting for you to come, and this is how you treat me. Not only do you refuse to kiss me or comfort me, you hit me. Heartless. Inhumane. Now I'm emotionally distraught, my neck hurts, and I think I'm having a heart attack. This illness is incurable. You'd better think carefully about what to do. Arthur pulled the blanket up high, leaving only his reproachful eyes visible, clearly demanding to be coddled. I let out an amused laugh. When did he become so coquettish? Though I have to admit, I rather enjoyed it. I closed my eyes and lowered my head slightly, placing an extremely light and quick kiss on his forehead. I know you behaved very well today. Here's your reward. Free of charge. It's on the house. Arthur's eyes flew open wide, gazing at me in disbelief. The pheromones in the air grew stronger. I gave him a light smack through the blanket. Control yourself. Don't lose it again. Arthur said nothing. He suddenly sat up and wrapped his arms around me, using his strength to flip me over. I was flung in a half circle on the bed, landing at the other end and sinking into the soft blankets, enveloped in his embrace. The next moment, he used his teeth to remove my suppressant patch, alternating between grazing the soft skin of my neck with his lips and teeth. Crispin Sheffield, may I bite you? I want to bite you. Arthur's voice had deepened considerably, filled with indescribable emotion. His pheromones, both domineering and gentle, slowly enveloped me. I squinted my eyes, enjoying his ministrations. Go ahead and bite. Isn't that why I came? With me around, Arthur was very well behaved. He started to see others in a better light and no longer held grudges against the countless pieces of new furniture at home. In the morning, he would even greet the butler kindly, moving Dustin to tears. The old man was so touched he almost wanted to kneel before me in gratitude. Arthur's condition had improved, but his clinginess only grew stronger by the day. He followed me everywhere, waited outside the bathroom door when I showered, had to sleep with his face pressed against my neck, and nearly pulled me onto his lap during meals. I was at my wits' end. So the moment Arthur's sensitive period ended, I made my escape. But even after leaving, I couldn't avoid Arthur's barrage of messages. Where are you? What are you doing? There's no alpha around you, right? Can I come see you for dinner? And so on and so forth. At first, I patiently replied once or twice, but later realizing he was simply bored, I stopped responding. When I ignored him, he started calling. When I didn't answer his calls, Dustin was sent to the front lines. Mr. Sheffield, it's terrible. The young master says he'll hang himself if you don't answer his calls. Mr. Sheffield, it's awful. The young master says he'll go on a hunger strike if you don't have dinner with him. Mr. Sheffield, help. The young master has lost control and is about to hit someone again. Mr. Sheffield. Stop. I couldn't take it anymore. I rarely rubbed my brow and put away the report filled with experimental data. Tell Arthur I'll come over tonight. Ask him to stop making a fuss. Right away, sir. Dustin chirped happily, rushing off to relay the message with a spring in his step. I leaned back in my chair, relaxing my body and massaging my slightly sore neck. I couldn't help but let out a wry chuckle. It had been a while since I'd seen Arthur. Counting the days, my heat would be coming in 2 months as well. As I was preparing to go to the Caldwell residence that evening, I noticed a very familiar car parked at the university gates. Shortly after, the Caldwell family driver got out of the driver's seat, bowed respectfully to me, and opened the rear door with one hand while keeping the other resting on his abdomen, waiting beside the car. This demeanor made it seem as if I were his employer. I silently slipped into the back seat. As soon as I got in, I was enveloped in a familiar bear hug. Arthur's prominent nose nuzzled against the side of my neck. I've missed you so much, he said. I gave him a playful smack on the head. Get off, or I'll report you for sexual harassment. Arthur buried his face and mumbled. It doesn't count, after all. He suddenly stopped, changing tack and asserting in a low voice. I'm just enjoying my legal rights in advance. I pretended not to understand what he meant, resting one hand on the car window while allowing him to cuddle and take advantage of the moment. Arthur took his clinginess to the extreme. Although he didn't do anything inappropriate, I spent the night being held by him like a koala hugging a tree. One might have thought his heat had arrived. His iron grip left me unable to move, and I woke up with aches in my back and neck after a whole night of this. Arthur was still fast asleep as I wriggled out of his embrace and stretched long and hard, arching my back. My reward to him was complete, and it was time to return to the lab to wrap things up. After washing up and packing my things, I went downstairs only to find a handsome mixed-race male Omega sitting in the lounge. He looked startled upon seeing me, then after a moment's pause, stood up angrily to question me. "Who are you? Why are you in Arthur's house?" The Omega seemed to come to a realization, dramatically furrowing his brows. "Are you his kept lover or something?" "What nonsense." The young mixed-race man folded his arms and snorted coldly. "I don't care if you're his kept person or whatever else, but you need to stop coming here. I'm Bertram Quinton, Arthur's future husband." I raised an eyebrow slightly. "Fiancé?" "That's right. You must know how rare Arthur's pheromones are. We have a 70% compatibility rate. The physiological attraction of highly compatible pheromones is irresistible. You know how rare that is, don't you? I suggest you be sensible and leave now before things get ugly." I nodded in agreement. Indeed, the higher the compatibility, the stronger the physical attraction, which greatly influences one's choice of mate. "I'm glad you understand," Bertram said, flicking his fringe. The butler, Dustin, materialized beside him like a ghost. "Young Master Quinton, this is Mr. Crispin Sheffield. He's not the young master's kept lover, but his pheromone compatibility with the young master is 100%. Dustin emphasized the word 100%, his tone rising at the end, quite proudly. "Bertram." Bertram stared at me in disbelief, looking me up and down as his expression went through a series of changes. After a moment of silence, he stammered, "So what if it's 100%? That's not the only criteria for choosing a mate. As long as two people have feelings for each other, an adequate compatibility is enough for a normal bond. You probably haven't seen Arthur during his sensitive periods, have you? You don't know that Arthur has severe mania. He wants to hit everyone he sees, but he's never hit me. I don't need to say more, do I?" Bertram looked smug. Before I could speak, Dustin leaned in close to him again. That's because the young master only hits alphas, not omegas. You should see the young master in front of Mr. Sheffield." Dustin shook his head and clicked his tongue twice. "He's so obedient, like a good puppy, only getting beaten up." Bertram was speechless for a long moment. Then he grabbed his hair and shouted in horror, "How can you hit people? How can Arthur keep such a savage person in the Caldwell house? You're going too far, MMPH. Dustin precisely stuffed a piece of bread into his mouth. "What nonsense are you talking about? The young master is very willing. He can't wait to get beaten up every day." Ignoring Bertram's shocked expression, Dustin respectfully brought over a cup of tea, his face full of kindly smiles. "Mr. Sheffield, this is premium black tea. You must be tired from last night. Would you like to try some?" "Me?" Bertram chewed up the bread in his mouth. "But Arthur said he would marry me. That was when the young master was playing house at 3 years old. He certainly won't acknowledge it now. His mother said so too. That was 20 years ago. At that time, the madam even said to let the young master marry 3 people at once." Bertram shouted at me, "Sheffield, don't you dare have any delusions. Come on. You two have said it all, what am I supposed to say?" I silently picked up the tea and took a couple of sips. Not quite to my taste, so I put it back down and patted Dustin's shoulder. "I'm heading back to the University of Ashbourne. Contact me if anything comes up." "Why are you leaving so soon?" Just as I was about to depart, Arthur woke up and came downstairs in his disheveled pajamas, his hair a mess. Crispin's eyes lit up, and he fluttered over to Arthur like a butterfly. "Arthur, darling. It's been so long, I've missed." But Arthur dodged Crispin's bare hug as if equipped with an automatic evasion system, leaving him to crash into the stair railing. "I asked why you're not staying longer," Arthur said, brushing my fringe aside. I glanced at Crispin behind him, who was now gnawing on his sleeve while being restrained by Dustin. I smirked. "Your fiancé is still here." It's not appropriate. If I stay, I'll just end up punching you. I turned to leave, with Arthur trailing behind me like a puppy. I don't have a fiancé. Don't slander me like that. Stay a few more days. Once you get busy, you never keep in touch. If you want to hit me, go ahead. I'm tough, you can even whip me if you like. Ignoring the clingy man-dog, I walked straight to the entryway. Before leaving, I caught a glimpse of Dustin cupping his hand to Crispin's ear, who was staring in shock. See? I told you the young master is very willing. Arthur followed me to the villa entrance, whining all the way. There's really nothing between us. He's just my mum's friend's son. I'd forgotten he even existed until he showed up. Everything he said is utter nonsense. Don't believe a word, he's just trying to drive us apart. Stay a few more days, please? I can't sleep without you at night. Sleep deprivation could cause my condition to relapse, and all your efforts would be wasted. Crispin? Darling? Sweetheart? Are you even listening? The sudden pet names made my skin crawl. I quickly turned to stop him. I need to go back to uni to finish my final experiment. My thesis just needs this last bit of data. It's crucial for my postgraduate degree. I'll be very busy these next few days. Be good and stay out of trouble, all right? I was more concerned about my experiment than that Omega. Arthur's face crumpled, but seeing how serious I looked, he could only hang his head dejectedly and mutter an "oh." The nearly 6 feet 3 inches man hunched over with his hands drooping. If he had a tail, it would surely be drooping listlessly too. Seeing his pitiful state, I mercifully added, "If you really miss me, you can call. But only after 10 p.m., I'll be in the lab until then." At these words, Arthur perked up as if pardoned. He happily picked me up and spun me around 3 times. Just as I was about to flip him reflexively, he quickly pecked me on the lips. "You focus on your work and take care. Dustin, have the driver take Crispin back to uni." The driver appeared promptly at his call. I got in the car with a slightly racing heart. My pulse remained unsteady the whole journey. Gazing at the bustling streets, I gently rubbed my lower lip with my fingertip. The day after tomorrow evening? I'm not sure if I'll have time. Can't you make time? Those bastards are all bringing their wives, I can't lose face. It's rare for my mates to get together like this, you need to come and back me up. I locked the laboratory door and moved my phone to my other ear. Isn't Bertram there? Why don't you ask him? A teeth-grinding sound came through the phone as Arthur gritted his teeth. Crispin Sheffield. This is the 88th time I've had to explain that there's nothing between Bertram and me. If you keep this up, I'll have to hang a sign declaring my innocence and then you'll have to come collect my body. I burst out laughing. You're laughing? You find this funny? Are you so happy at the thought of my death? Planning to remarry before I'm even in the ground, are you? Let me tell you, Crispin Sheffield, don't even think about remarrying. I'll. All right, calm down. I'll go. Having received my confirmation, Arthur hung up, satisfied. The experiments were finished anyway, so I might as well humor him. After working for several days straight, I felt hungry now that I could relax. I decided to head out of the university for a late-night snack. Passing by an old alley, I heard intermittent cries for help. Squinting my eyes, I saw 2 thuggish-looking lads surrounding someone, seemingly up to no good. TSK, some people are really brazen. I flexed my wrists and walked over, tapping the 2 on their shoulders. Who's that? Who the hell's poking their nose in? An Omega? Pretty one too. What, you want to play with us as well? I grinned, I'm your father. I raised my foot and kicked hard. One of them slammed against the wall, shaking off 2 layers of plaster. Bloody hell, you're asking for it. The other one charged at me, face contorted. After a few hooks and shoulder throws, both were rolling on the ground, wailing. Seeing me about to call the police, they quickly scrambled up, one supporting the other, and scurried away timidly. I dusted myself off and turned around. To my surprise, the person who had been surrounded was Bertram. Bertram seemed terrified. He burst into tears and threw himself into my arms. Are you out of your mind? Don't you know how vulnerable you are? How dare you go to a pub alone? What if I hadn't run into you? Have you even thought about the consequences? Bertram Quinton mumbled between sobs. I just wanted to see if Arthur really didn't care about me, so I thought I'd get him to pick me up. How was I to know he'd just tell me to call my family's driver? I gave him a frustrated knock on the head. What's wrong with your family driver? Isn't it normal for them to pick you up? And you got all sulky and went to a pub alone, not even noticing you were being followed. You're going to get yourself killed one of these days with your stupidity. Bertram wanted to argue but didn't dare. He glanced at me a few times, slowly edging closer and tugging at my arm in an appeasing manner. Thanks for helping me. I would have been done for otherwise. You were so cool back there. Is that how you beat up Arthur too? I rolled my eyes, not bothering to answer. Really, I was mesmerized. I didn't know an Omega could be so strong. Can I call you Crispin from now on? I didn't agree, but Bertram started calling me that anyway. Crispin, does that combo move you did have a name? Can you teach me? I want to beat up alphas like that too. You know, in that moment, it was like the world went into slow motion. I almost thought I was falling in love with you. You were so cool. No wonder Arthur likes you. Compared to you, I'm just a plain, dry chicken. As he rambled on, the Quinton family driver finally arrived, profusely thanking me. Bertram was still chattering in my ear, so I shoved him into the car in exasperation. As the car started moving, he rolled down the window and shouted with his hands cupped around his mouth. Crispin, I won't fight you for Arthur anymore, he is yours. As if you could win him from me even if you tried. After the car disappeared from view, I put one hand in my pocket, bought some fried noodles, and walked away. On the day of the gathering, I arrived as planned. Arthur insisted on putting his arm around my waist as we entered, claiming, "This way we'll look truly in love." Arthur's friends were like him, all from well-off families, each making waves in the business world, and most of them already married. I obediently played the role of Arthur's wife, keeping my head down and focusing on the food. After several rounds of drinks, many were starting to slur their words. Somehow the topic shifted from business to boasting about their wives. My Aubrey is just too considerate. He'll get up in the middle of the night to make me hangover soup when I've been drinking, worried about my stomach. I'm afraid he'll catch a cold. The group cheered as I helped myself to a prawn. My wife's the same. She knows I skip meals when I'm busy, so she comes to the office every day with food she's made herself. She watches me eat. Look, I've even put on weight. Everyone applauded while I ladled myself some fish soup. Haha, my darling can't cook, but he loves to cling to me. At night, he has to lie on top of me to fall asleep. Another round of teasing ensued. As I was deciding what to eat next, a beef rib was placed in my bowl. Arthur put down his chopsticks, tilted his head back slightly, and cleared his throat. My wife cares for me too. When I go mad, he beats me until I can't even crawl on the ground and can knock me out with one strike. He's just afraid I might accidentally hurt myself. Sudden silence fell over the room. Plop, the bone dropped into the bowl. Everyone there, whether Alpha or Omega, looked at me in disbelief. I smacked Arthur on the back of the head, gritting my teeth as I whispered, "If you'd kept quiet, no one would have thought you were mute." The atmosphere grew tense as all eyes focused on Arthur, seemingly worried he might lose his temper. But he just gave a cheeky laugh and ladled me some more soup. "Have you eaten enough? Have some more soup. You need to put on some weight, you're too thin." The others' eyes widened, then the room erupted. They stood up, toasting me with cries of "Sister-in-law is formidable," and "Sister-in-law is awesome." Arthur waved his hand, accepting all the drinks. I've got this. My wife can't drink, so I'll drink for both of us. No need to be polite." Watching his gleeful demeanor, I helplessly rubbed my forehead. Arthur had drunk quite a bit. Most people had left, but he was still clinging to me, refusing to get up. I patted the hand around my neck. "Get off, you need to go home." Arthur hugged me and swayed. I don't want to go home alone. I want my wife to come with me. Who's your wife? I'm not your wife. We hadn't even confessed or proposed, so I wasn't accepting that. I used brute force to pull Arthur up and supported him as we walked out. Just as I was about to call Dustin to come upstairs and lend a hand, we were suddenly stopped by an unfamiliar voice. Well, if it isn't young Mr. Caldwell. What a coincidence. I turned around to see a middle-aged man with a noticeably receding hairline, arm in arm with a fair-skinned Omega, stumbling towards us. Arthur immediately straightened up and stood in front of me, his eyes clear. Mr. Harwood, what a surprise to run into you here. It's fate, I tell you. After that unfortunate incident last time, I simply must treat you to another drink today. Come, come. The man pulled Arthur into a nearby private room, busying himself with pouring drinks. Arthur leaned close to my ear. This Mr. Harwood has some connections. Caldwell Industries has a business deal with him. So we usually try to humor him when we can, but he's not exactly a man of good character. See that Omega? He was a waiter at Royal Redbridge Restaurant last time. By the looks of it, old Harwood must have gotten his hands on him then. Mr. Harwood poured a glass of wine with a slimy smile, then quite crudely slapped the Omega's bottom. What are you standing there for? Go offer Mr. Caldwell a drink. The young man trembled, timidly taking the wine glass and approaching Arthur with trepidation in his voice. Mr. Caldwell, I'd like to offer you a toast. Mr. Harwood was still smiling, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. He was clearly up to no good. I frowned slightly and snatched the glass from the Omega's hand. Mr. Caldwell has had quite a lot to drink today. I'll take this one on his behalf. Arthur tried to take the glass, but I downed it in one go, then choked a bit on the strong alcohol. Are you all right? Are you okay? Arthur asked worriedly. I covered my mouth and shook my head, patting his hand to show I was fine. Mr. Harwood looked somewhat surprised. And who might this be? My partner. He can't hold his liquor well, so I should take him home now. We'll continue this another time. Arthur firmly rejected Mr. Harwood's attempts to make us stay, ignoring his protests and forcefully leading me out. I leaned back in the rear seat, my head feeling a bit dizzy. Despite the damp, cool night temperature, I inexplicably felt hot, as if there was a fire burning inside me. Arthur's arm around me tightened. Faintly, I thought I could smell my own pheromones. This wasn't right. It shouldn't be happening now. Arthur's Adam's apple bobbed as he asked in a low voice. Crispin, when is your heat cycle supposed to start? I collapsed into his arms, my hands clutching his collar desperately as I gasped for air. That drink, there was something wrong with it. Arthur carried me back to the bedroom. I curled up on the bed, cold sweat soaking my back, but my breath was scorching hot. So hot. Dustin, go get the suppressants. But sir, we don't have any that Mr. Sheffield can use, and at this hour the chemist's. Then borrow some. Go find Bertram. Arthur knelt on the bed, wiping the sweat from my brow. Instinctively, I grabbed his hand, feeling the bulging veins under my fingertips. Not enough. This small skin contact wasn't nearly enough. The heat rose, making my whole body swell. My rationality was on the verge of collapse. Arthur, a temporary mark, please help me. I pulled him down, embracing him. Bite me. The arms around my waist suddenly tightened. The next moment, sharp teeth pierced the skin on my nape, and a surge of pheromones flooded into my gland. Blood was racing, bones softening. Like a dying man receiving final comfort, I let out a muffled groan. Arthur kissed my forehead, stroking my back. Are you feeling any better? I buried my face in his chest, biting my lower lip. The heat that had just subsided suddenly surged back tenfold, feeling like my muscles and bones were burning to ash. It hurt so much. Arthur, the temporary mark, it's not working. All sensations were gradually melting into a thick, viscous fluid. Every cell in my body was screaming with desire. I want. No. Arthur cut me off harshly. Crispin, you're under the influence of drugs right now. You're not thinking clearly. I don't want you to regret this later. Just hold on a bit longer. The suppressants will be here soon. He kept kissing me soothingly. Be good, love. Just hold on a little longer. As he spoke, Dustin rushed in with Bertram, carrying a case. Cold liquid was injected into my body as everyone watched me intently. I struggled to sit up, gritting my teeth and holding on for a moment. But still couldn't control myself from collapsing. It wasn't working. The suppressants weren't working either. I let out a pained whimper. Young Mr. Quinton, are these suppressants expired? Impossible. These are the best suppressants from abroad. They can't be ineffective. What exactly did he drink? My consciousness was already too muddled to hear clearly what the people around me were saying. Like a drowning man desperately grasping a piece of driftwood, I clung tightly to Arthur's hand, calling his name over and over. In my daze, I think he sternly ordered everyone else out of the room. My limp body was propped up, my chin held firmly so I could only look straight ahead. Arthur's face was tense as he spoke slowly and deliberately, enunciating each word. Crispin, there are some things I was planning to say later, but now I have no choice but to say them early. I love you. I love you to the point of madness, wanting to possess you completely. I want to marry you. I want us to live under the same roof in life and have our ashes buried in the same grave in death. Now, if I were to mark you completely, would you be willing? Arthur spoke with immense gravity, each word carrying an indescribable weight. He waited silently for my response. But my throat felt like it was on fire, too hoarse to make a sound. With trembling hands, I clutched his collar and closed my eyes, pressing a burning kiss to his lips. The Caldwell mansion was under lockdown for 3 days, with no one allowed in or out. When I regained consciousness, I found myself clean and refreshed, but feeling as if I'd been pummeled by a hammer. The presence of another's pheromones in my glands was a clear indication that I had fully bonded with someone else. I narrowed my eyes at the man holding me, as fragments of memory flooded back. It had been chaotic and absurd. In a fit of pique, I bit Arthur's arm, waking him up. I glared accusingly. Your technique was rubbish. Arthur snapped out of his groggy state, gaping at me for a while before anxiously asking, "Do you remember what you promised me?" I blinked. Of course I do. He visibly relaxed, pulling me back into his embrace. His warm palm caressed my smooth back. I was worried you'd do a runner once it was over. I'm glad you remember. Let me tell you, you're a married woman now. No giving me the cold shoulder. You can't refuse when your husband wants kisses and cuddles, and you're not to look twice at any other alphas. You must constantly express your love for your husband. For instance, when you wake up in the morning, give your husband a kiss first and sweetly say I love you. Understood? So many demands. I smiled, about to wrap my arms around him when I noticed a silver glint on my finger. Upon closer inspection, I saw an elegant wedding ring on my ring finger. Arthur brought my hand to his lips and kissed it. This ring was only recently custom-made. I had planned to find the perfect moment to propose. But given the sudden turn of events, we put it to use straight away. Now that we've sealed the deal, you can't back out of the marriage. I grabbed his hand, glancing at his ring. It was a similar style, but clearly more expensive. My heart swelled with warmth. I intertwined our fingers, swaying them contentedly before burrowing into his chest. I won't back out. I love you too. Mr. Harwood was eventually caught using illegal substances. It was said that Arthur Caldwell was the target that day. Mr. Harwood had originally planned to send one of his own people to Arthur's bed, intending to use this to blackmail the Caldwell family for a larger share of profits. He had used this tactic on others more than once before. Unexpectedly, I intervened and the plot was exposed. Under Arthur's instructions, Dustin Lancaster put a sack over Mr. Harwood's head and left him crying for mercy at the docks. Afterwards, the Caldwell and Quinton families joined forces to gather evidence. No matter how powerful Mr. Harwood's backers were, they couldn't escape the consequences this time. As for Arthur, he was gleefully preparing for the wedding, insisting on being personally involved in every detail. He even wanted to decide the exact placement of flowers at the venue and handwrite all the invitations himself. He went as far as dictating what colors the guests should wear to the wedding. When Arthur's mother learned about us, she didn't seem very surprised, as if she had anticipated it all along. She patted my shoulder approvingly. "Crispin, dear, I've spoiled that naughty son of mine. You'll have to help me keep him in line from now on. If he ever bullies you, just tell me and I'll give him a good thrashing." Bertram Quinton was munching on bread nearby. "No need for that, Mrs. Caldwell. My mate Crispin here could take him down with one hand tied behind his back." Arthur's mother nodded approvingly again. "That's my daughter-in-law for you. Oh, and I've already told your mom about this. She should be back in the country soon. We'll have a nice dinner together then. It's been ages since I've caught up with her. That girl's always off gallivanting somewhere." My mom? They know each other? As I was pondering this, my phone rang. It was my mom, probably sunbathing on some beach ogling young men. "Hello? Crispin darling, do you miss Mummy? Are you cuddled up with your dear husband picking out wedding outfits?" I replied coldly, "No, and no." "Oh, don't be shy, love. I'll be back in 2 weeks, and I can't wait to see my OTP in person at last. Oh, and remember, no heavy lifting or strenuous exercise for now. Bloating and nausea are normal, but don't take any medication. It'll pass after 3 months. Tell Arthur the wedding dress shouldn't be too fitted, in case it doesn't fit later. Keep the ceremony simple too, so you don't get too tired. You might be a bit moody and emotional for a while, that's normal too. Don't worry that you've developed bipolar disorder or anything. Oh, I've just spotted another fit young lad with a nice bum. Got to dash, bye." What did she mean? I stared at my phone in confusion. Looking up, I saw Arthur had stopped flipping through the wedding planner. The tea Dustin was pouring had overflowed across the table. Bertram had forgotten to chew his bread. Arthur's mother clasped her face and wailed, "A doctor. Someone call a doctor." I froze. Oh no. The sky is falling.